Okay,
So
cool.
first off, what's going on right now?
Well, right now, Ethereum wise,
Just
crypto wise.
crypto wise.
Oh, what's going on right now? I think we're in a bull run. I think that's the first important thing to mention here. And crypto prices in general, especially Bitcoin and Ethereum, I see at least are rising very rapidly. Why that's happening, I think, can be because of quite a lot of like different things. Some of them might be political, some of them might be related to trust in centralized institutions, and others might just be FOMO, which is probably a large part of what's happening as well. Which is FOMO is just fear of missing out. So anytime you get the feeling like, oh no, someone else is making money, maybe I should look at this or buy something too. Uh, Quite likely that a lot of what's happening is related to that. So I think, yeah. And but you're a crypto investor too, right? So, well, what's on your mind in terms of what's happening? What are your considerations and your questions?
Well, I have many, but what is quite concerning is that right now every store I walk into, they are talking about Bitcoin.
Yeah, yeah,
This is a sign that okay, maybe it's time to sell. I'm not going to sell because I'm a hodler,
yeah,
long-term hodler, but this is 2017 all over again.
yeah. It's fascinating, right?
Yeah,
It's
it's insane. And right now, the articles that are being sent to me from in group apps, like from nu.nl, this Dutch news site, like people are just buying Bitcoin because they want to pay for it.
oh really?
Oh,
Oh, okay.
thanks, nu.nl.
Usually when I buy something, it's because I want to pay for it.
Yeah,
Yeah,
exactly.
yeah.
But yeah, like all over the place, I get WhatsApp messages from people I haven't spoken into in 3 years, basically since the last peak, and they are asking me, "Hey Niels, what is your target? And should I buy right now?" Um, I'm not giving any financial advice or anything, but it's quite interesting to see that this is again the whole cycle we are entering,
Yeah, yeah,
which I anticipate this will go on for a while, and I think we're just at the beginning. But these are all topics that we discussed in our first episode on Bitcoin.
yeah,
That we are just at the brink of a new technological revolution, so to speak.
yeah, for sure. Yeah, it's not something we have to go into again.
Yeah, true.
Now it's I guess the main focus will be we know the main focus will be Ethereum. What is
Exactly.
it, etc.
Exactly. Yeah, that that is the indeed the main focus for this talk, because we talked about Bitcoin. We got some great feedback. We got some questions after the first episode. Okay, cool. What is this whole Bitcoin thing? And it made things for me a lot clearer. But then you have a million other crypto projects,
Yeah,
and Ethereum, of course, is the most well known after Bitcoin.
yeah.
And I also think that Ethereum, from the people that I know, has the most, let's say, insiders are backing it, and they are really enthusiastic about Ethereum. Um, and the funny thing is that me myself, I never really looked into Ethereum too much because I am a full-on Bitcoin maximalist a little bit, and I have some side projects,
Okay, yeah.
but not a lot. And I missed the whole Ethereum train back in the day. But now I'm
Ah,
thinking, okay, actually, it doesn't sound too bad. I hear some stuff that they're building, and I'm thinking, okay, maybe I should go back. I should look into Ethereum again.
okay, cool.
And of course, that's where this episode is great
Right.
for that, because you, of course, you work with Ethereum on a daily basis. You work with crypto, and you can undoubtedly tell me everything I need to know about this.
I think yeah. So this is going to be an introductory kind of episode to give you the information that you need to decide whether you think it's interesting to buy or like look more into just to spark your interest and give you an understanding of how it works.
Yeah, I first of all, I just want to know what is Ethereum, and
Good start.
people have all these crazy theories that it will change the world forever, and I just want to hear it from someone that actually works with
Yes.
it, and I want to know if it's worth it, if it's worth my money, worth my investment, and yeah, I will go into this again with a beginner's mind because now I truly have a beginner's mind. I am not well read on Ethereum,
Cool.
so I'm gonna ask you probably some really stupid questions,
Great. I love
but
those.
hold on and forgive me those.
Okay.
But first off, I think just starting, What is Ethereum?
Well, Ethereum is, first of all, it's a cryptocurrency. It's been around since 2014-ish. The thing with these projects always is that, the inception starts with an idea and just some people getting together and coding. And
Yeah.
it was the same for Ethereum. So it's a cryptocurrency. It's the second largest on CoinMarketCap, which is more or less the website you can go to look at the whole cryptocurrency ecosystem and see a list of the largest ones. So it's a good second place. It's very different from Bitcoin in a lot of factors, really. And I'll get into like what those factors are. The story of Ethereum is also quite an interesting one, really. It's created by Vitalik Buterin, and it's a very young guy. I think he's around my age. It's fascinating. As far as I can tell, he's very, very intelligent and sophisticated.
It looks like an AI.
He talks also a little bit like a, yeah. But the cool thing is, what I like is when you see an interview with him, he's humble, he's very kind, but he's also very single-minded, like just focusing on the project, very not markety or salesy at all. Like, yeah, basically a little bit AI, like very computer kind of approach to these things. And honestly, it's quite fascinating how the role he plays also in the ecosystem, because in many cases the face of a project, might be less in the cryptocurrency ecosystem, but in the traditional organizations, usually they're like CEOs. They don't necessarily understand the lower tech, but this guy, Ethereum founder, it really worked on very fundamental aspects of the blockchain and coded like a lot of the fundamental principles there.
A bit like the Elon Musk of blockchain.
Yeah, I guess. Yeah. I guess you could say that. The Elon Musk of Ethereum for sure. Yeah, I guess that's a pretty good comparison. So what's interesting is he dropped out of uni to write for Bitcoin Magazine and Bitcoin Weekly, as far as I remember, and that's how he got into the cryptocurrency community. And he was like a big time gamer before that, and he was already interested in this just because he like it. Theoretically, it's possible to not have a centralized system, and we talked about centralization a lot more in our previous episode. And this got him fascinated, of course, because if you know how to code and you see in the ecosystem all these projects developing that could kind of defy the centralization, and that you could theoretically build it, and you get in touch with these people, you start writing for these websites. Well, he traveled all around the world, also for that job, and eventually, when starting to write full time for these sites, he also met people that were working on Mastercoin, which is now renamed. I forgot what the actual new project name is, and it's not big anymore. But basically, what they wanted to do is create something called a colored coin on top of Bitcoin. So Bitcoin, so Bitcoin itself, as you know, is just one cryptocurrency. And in other blockchains and systems, you can have currencies built on top of a blockchain. And a colored coin is more or less this, but then for Bitcoin. So you would give a transaction, you would give it like metadata. So you would add like a layer on top of Bitcoin, basically. And this layer on top of Bitcoin can allow for different types of tokens on the Bitcoin ecosystem as well. But this does not include something that Vitalik Buterin saw as a very important aspect for at least what he had in mind as an ideal, which is the ability to not only create colored coins, which is pretty limited. Like you can create multiple coins on top of Bitcoin, but also create like arbitrary programs on top of the blockchain.
Okay, just hang on.
Yeah.
So this is something different than a fork.
Very much, yeah.
Okay.
It's yeah.
So Bitcoin Cash is not a colored coin. That's a fork, right?
Yeah. That's a
And
fork.
what is exactly the difference?
So in this case, a colored coin would be like a layer on top of it.
Yeah.
So it's like a proposal or a project, and they do research, but we would add a layer of data on top of it, and we would kind of integrate with the Bitcoin blockchain. But you could also say we split off the Bitcoin blockchain at some point, and we touched a little bit upon this in the previous episode as well, because there is a disagreement in the network You have a differentiation between a hard fork and a soft fork. We don't have to go into exactly what that is. If you do, we can, if you want to. But it more or less comes down to you copy the whole blockchain, and part of the network, the people that support chain one, will stay there, and part of the network will go to chain two.
All right.
And in this case, you have two chains that run on the same history, but from this point on, they're doing different things.
Okay, so where with the fork there is a real hard split
Yeah, in a hard fork.
in a hard fork, of course, and with the whole colored coin concept, that stays within the project, within the chain.
Yeah, so it would not be, you wouldn't have to split Bitcoin to create a colored coin situation necessarily. Technically, you could just add colored coins into Bitcoin itself without doing a hard fork, I think, depending on how you would try to implement it. And this is also an interesting thing to highlight in the difference between Bitcoin and Ethereum, is the kind of development culture and community is very different between the two. And we work with, so we don't build very strictly on top of these chains in the work that I do, but we use both of them. So we know kind of how they work and how the ecosystems work. And in Bitcoin, you see that the developer ecosystem is very conservative. So they are very focused with the software that they develop on making sure that things are what you call backwards compatible. So when we would create a proposal to expand Bitcoin to some new functionality, the Bitcoin community would look at this with like, okay, great idea, but all the previous versions that are being run now in the network of this piece of software, they still have to work when you actually release this. And you can imagine that when you have to take into account the fact that there's, I don't know, maybe 10 versions running in the network or more, and you want to propose a change, you have to think very carefully about what kind of change it is that you're proposing and what the consequences will be of the network running that, and also that you cannot force people to run it. In Bitcoin, you can say, no, I don't want to run this new version, and then the network should still work.
All right.
In Ethereum, this is very different. They're more pragmatic. They're basically more not giving a fuck, saying move fast and break things. If they think it's a new good change for the future, they'll implement it. Other clients that run the network, like other nodes, might fail because they don't support the new changes. We've had that a couple of times as well, where suddenly we have like strange things happening. We're like, wait, what? Or we're coding something in one of the Ethereum clients, and someone in the team says, yeah, these guys, they accepted this new proposal, and now suddenly this is different, and now everything breaks, which is far more normal in Ethereum. And the advantage is here that they create new things very fast. So in terms of new releases and software, they go way faster than Bitcoin.
Okay, but what did they actually create? What is it, the thing they build?
Okay, so we now went into a little bit of the backstory of Ethereum. You can also already see some of the differences between Bitcoin and Ethereum. Now, part of the reasons for these differences, I guess that's what you're asking, is really Ethereum is not only a cryptocurrency that you can use to, well, send to other people, which is effectively what Bitcoin is, then with a lot of like awesome things built into the system, as we spoke about. Ethereum does this too. But Ethereum also has something called, and this is where it gets fascinating, they want to create, and already have created, a world computer. And what this means is, let's take the fact that we now in the world have billions of devices. All of these devices have a different kind of sense of the truth. As in, your specific mobile phone has its own data. It has its own storage, and it has its own kind of perspective of the truth. It's its own isolated kind of device.
What does that mean, the truth?
Basically, the truth is what is stored on your disk.
Okay.
That's kind of the world that your mobile phone or your laptop kind of lives in, more or less. So, as you know, a blockchain does not have a lot of truth. It's one truth. It's distributed over a lot of computers, but every full node, like every part of the network, has the full truth. There's this one truth in general. And this truth develops over time, but the whole network will grow just in the same direction. And if it doesn't, you'll get a fork, right?
Try to make that a little bit more clear for me. Like,
Okay.
So the blockchain has one truth. What does that mean?
Well, basically it means that when I send you money,
Yeah.
in Bitcoin and Ethereum, it's the same idea. Before that is accepted, the whole network has the same view of the world. My transaction is available and known and validated, so like really verified by every single node in the network.
So there's consensus in the network that this is the truth.
Yes.
Okay.
Full consensus.
Yeah.
And the thing is, Ethereum has this full consensus, just like Bitcoin does, but this full consensus is actually also a computer. So next to the fact that you can send transactions to each other, it can also run code. And the state of this program that is run on Ethereum is also the same everywhere in the network, because it's literally running on the same kind of technology.
Okay, I see.
So me sending you a transaction in Bitcoin is known everywhere. Me sending you a transaction in Ethereum is known everywhere. But me sending you the execution of a program and what happens inside of that program and after it is also known all throughout the network. It's the same truth everywhere.
So where Bitcoin is just focused on one part of what is possible technically, that is the transaction component.
Yeah.
Ethereum takes this concept and brings it to like the whole computer aspect of things, of technology.
Yes, exactly.
So code is the same here and there's the same there. Is it, okay.
It's exactly the same. So yeah, and this works with something called smart contracts.
All right. What is that?
Basically, a smart contract is a program. It's nothing more or less than a program. And a very important part to highlight here, one of the main differences as well between a smart contract, a program on Ethereum, and a program that's running on your mobile phone, is that in Ethereum, you have to, well, in every program, you have to consider something they call a halting problem. And this is a problem in computer science that has been proven by someone called Alan Turing, kind of the founder of computer science, some people say, but it was a long story, that you cannot prove that a computer program will eventually stop.
What?
You cannot be certain that a computer program will stop.
How do you mean stop?
When you create an algorithm, like just some steps that have to be run. This is what an algorithm is. Like, first do this, then do this, then do this. And then if this, then maybe do this. Some steps. Of course, you can easily create an algorithm that eventually stops running, right? Because you can say if this, then this, and then you just don't write any code anymore and the program stops because it's done.
All right, okay.
Right. But you cannot theoretically prove that a program necessarily will always stop. So there is a situation where a program might continue to run like eternally if the computer would allow it. And the problem here is that theoretically on your mobile phone, that might not be a problem because your mobile phone will run out of battery power at some point. But when you have a world computer with devices running like everywhere,
yeah,
and my program will be run by your device or anyone else's device on the whole world, then this becomes an issue because I can write a program that never stops. Because it's not we kind of know that we cannot prove that it will eventually stop, so I can write one that will never stop.
All right.
Right, and if I write a program that will never stop and you run it on your computer, then I basically hijack your computer. Like I just make sure that your computer does nothing else than run my program eternally.
And I cannot stop that.
You cannot stop it.
Why not?
Well, I mean, you can pull out the plug, but the problem here is that Ethereum itself, it cannot decide collectively like, now there is because we cannot find out that the program will stop eventually because we cannot prove it. So when this program is launched onto Ethereum, there's not really a way to say, this particular program here is eventually going to stop. You can only figure out that it's going to stop by running the program. Do you know what I mean?
No.
Before you run the program that is sent onto the network,
Yeah.
you cannot say it will stop eventually. You first have to run it on the network to see that it will stop.
All right.
But what if it doesn't stop? Then if it does not stop, that means that all devices on the network will end up running a program that will never stop running.
Yeah, check.
And that's super risky because you have all these devices that people pay money for it to run and they think, okay, this network is going to, I believe in this project. But then someone could launch a program onto Ethereum and they basically makes the whole network congest, right? Eventually, the whole network will be running a program that doesn't stop. So you need to have eventually to kind of make sure that it will stop. Like there is a halt to the program.
Do you have to build that in?
Yeah, but you can't, because you can't prove that it will.
So how does that work then?
This is what they do with gas, and this is kind of where I wanted to go. In Ethereum, the complexity, one of the major risks here when building a computer that runs on so many devices at the same time, is that you have to imagine, if my endless program runs on your mobile phone, then it's not an issue because your mobile phone will die and it's fine. But if the network is unbeatable, as you know with Bitcoin, you cannot beat it. You cannot, like, you can destroy half of the network, but the half of the network will still keep running the other half. An endless program will basically stop the whole network from working because it's just continuously working on this single thing.
Okay.
You need to eventually make sure that it stops, as in it runs out of battery power. And in Ethereum, you have gas for this. This is literally kind of the fuel that you put in your car. Your car will stop running once the gas tank is empty. And you pay for gas per transaction. Does that make sense so far?
Yeah, I'm following.
Okay, so
I'm trying to follow. I have a lot of questions, but go
you
on.
can interrupt
go on,
me.
please.
All right, so when I send you a transaction, or I send you like part of a program to be executed, a
Yeah.
contract, and this would be this endless program, and you start running this endless program, and all these devices on the network start running this endless program. Eventually, the gas that is in that transaction, the gas that I'm willing to pay for that transaction on the network, because I'm the one that sends it, so I have to pay for it, of course, is limited. I don't want to pay that amount, and I pay the network for running this program. So everyone on the network will run this program, and I pay for that. Of course,
That's the gas.
that's the gas, and there's a limit to this. So when the gas is done, they'll stop running. Doesn't matter whether they're done running, they'll stop. So if I don't have enough gas, then
But okay, but how does this work? Because I get the fact that if I release a program onto the Ethereum blockchain,
Yeah.
the network, I will have to pay gas. So I am paying, like you just described, for that program to run. And if my gas is gone, it's empty, then the program stops. How does that work then?
right. So
Because I just launched it on a network, and you just said it will run forever.
yeah, but the thing is, you don't want it to run forever, because that means that everyone on the network will end up running this thing forever.
Yeah, exactly.
Yeah, so that's because there's an agreement in the whole network. Like, hey, if you are someone that is hooked into the Ethereum network, and you run the software of Ethereum, and you execute someone's transaction, well, you're going to stop when the gas that they have provided is run out, like it's finished. And this allows the Ethereum network to say, well, you can supply any transaction and even an endless program, which would be fine, but you're forced to always set a certain amount of gas, which is a limited amount of gas. So that means that at some point your gas is finished,
It will
and
stop.
they will stop, and they will just continue with the next transaction.
And how does this play into a smart contract?
So, as I said, a smart contract is a program,
Yeah.
and it's you could imagine that it's quite cool to have a world computer, but like I said, there's but one of the major risks was this endless program. So that's solved now. We know that we have gas, and the smart contracts themselves are basically programs that can do anything that any other computer can. So they can run any form of logic, of code that your mobile phone can, that your smartwatch can, that your desktop computer at home can. It's the same kind of logic that it can run. But in this case, the result of running that program, as in, I don't know, you post something on Facebook, right? Then right before you post your post on Facebook, you have a timeline that is maybe full with your friends, but not your post yet. That's the current state of the Facebook timeline. After you post, the new state of the Facebook timeline is your post included, because you just added a post. This is what you call a state transition. So it's from state A to state B, because state B is your post, and before that was state A without your post. These states are stored on the blockchain. And this is basically the world computer concept. You can build the code of Facebook on top of Ethereum, and the whole state of the timeline will be stored in transactions on Ethereum. So the whole thing is one blockchain.
All right.
And this is what smart contracts are, is the logic of Facebook, more or less.
Okay, I'm still trying to get the concept of a smart contract, because in my mind it was just a piece of self-fulfilling code.
Okay. Self-fulfilling code. What do you mean with self-fulfilling code?
Or like I read somewhere that a smart contract, that is when let's say we make a deal on the blockchain, an agreement, and that, for instance, when I buy a house from you, and when I pay my part of the deal, I pay up, then I will automatically get your keys. As in, that's a contract, and that's a smart contract because it's self-fulfilling. It's a self-fulfilling contract.
You could do this.
But is that what it is?
I would say it's like a tiny, tiny fraction of what it really is.
All right.
So the possibilities on top of this self-fulfilling contract are way more extensive than only that.
Okay.
You can do so much more with smart contracts, and that's one of the reasons I think Ethereum is very cool. You can literally build any kind of software on top of Ethereum. Anything.
And
Theoretically.
that is why it's called a smart contract.
That's why it's called. You can forget the term immediately. Well, that's why it's called a Turing complete. Turing complete virtual machine, basically, is what they built. It's basically a virtual computer that can run any kind of code. And with this, you can create smart contracts, because you can imagine that I can write some simple code that says, once someone pays me this amount of ether,
Yeah.
then to the person that sent me that ether, I will send them keys. That's a pretty simple program to create. Like, well, if I receive this, then I send that.
And
simple.
okay, I understand that, but why is that so powerful? Why is that so revolutionary?
Well, the reason that's so revolutionary is because you can, well, first of all, you create something called, and a lot of other people call, programmable money. So instead of just spending money and then the consequences of you spending money being in the real world,
Yeah.
as in I send you Bitcoin, and then you sent me through WhatsApp or whatever, you sent me whatever I paid you for, right?
Yeah, true.
Well, that kind of sucks, because I have no guarantee that you're actually going to send me that stuff. Well, with a smart contract, you can build this in. You're absolutely guaranteed to get what you are supposed to get, because the smart contract itself is public on the blockchain. It's completely set in stone on the blockchain. You can verify it. You can look at that code. If you send this amount of Ethereum there, you will 100% get your keys.
All right. That's for me why I thought it was called a contract.
Yeah, I mean, that's the legitimate. To be honest, I think the concept contract is a little bit confusing, because it
Okay.
only says so much about what is really possible.
Yeah, okay, true.
But then again, it's also hard to explain what's really possible. So yeah.
Well, that's why I'm asking all of these
Right.
these questions. All right, that makes sense so far. Could you give an example of that, like how this will affect my life or can improve my life?
Oh, yeah, there's some really, really cool examples, actually. To start, well, you've actually given a perfect example of a very simple situation, a contract literally where you say, you send this and you get back this.
Yeah.
And in real life, the best example I can give of what you just, like a practical example, is an ICO.
What's an ICO?
An ICO is, you might be familiar, well, I know you're familiar with IPO, which is an initial public offering, is when a company lists their own shares on an exchange. And of course, for a company, this is a very interesting move to make, because it can definitely increase not only the shareholders' amounts of assets, but also just the future of the company. It basically is a great way to raise money. And you can do the same thing with a currency that you create on top of the blockchain. And the currency you actually created with exactly the example that you just gave. You create a small program, a smart contract that says, when someone sends Ethereum to this contract, send them back my token. And my token is, maybe it's the Nils token or the Zowie token. And I create a small program that defines there's a Zowie token. when someone sends money, Ethereum or Ether, to this contract, then send them back this token. And then it's recorded on the blockchain that you hold this token.
And this token I can see as a share, basically.
Well,
If I have a Zowie token, I have shares in company Zowie.
that's a really good question. You do not legally own shares because they are not backed by a central entity, right? So when I buy shares in a company, you want the company to be registered. There are shareholders agreements. There's like a lot of legal aspects to it. The problem here is that if that were the case, you would have a security.
And that's an STO.
Yes.
Okay, we can dive into that.
That's a
later.
different, yeah, yeah.
Different
You're not completely
All right.
oblivious, but yeah, exactly. That's an STO.
Thanks, Zoe. Yeah. All right. Yeah. So far, I can see the implications that this Ethereum thing has. This sounds quite interesting. What I'm struggling with is that it sounds very technical, and it sounds like a lot to understand or digest for someone that is just new to crypto and they have heard for Bitcoin for the first time maybe, and now they see Ethereum, and then you come with this whole story of the world computer. It's very technical. Do people really need to know all this stuff? Like, why do they need to know this?
Yeah, it's funny when you're in this bubble, then you forget that you're talking as if we're living in the future. You know,
Yeah,
it's like
exactly.
what the hell is all of this stuff? Like I just want to pay with normal money. I think it's not necessary at all to know all of these things. I mean I think it's useful, right? If you want to be an early adopter and you want to invest, I would advise you to understand some of these things, because one of the reasons I'm interested in Ethereum is because I know this stuff and I realized like, whoa, this could be big because this is serious stuff. But I think the most important thing to kind of know is the real world applications. And if you would have asked me or anyone, I guess in 2017, that question would be a lot harder to answer because there weren't that many. There was just some basic, there were ICOs were there. The contracts of send Ether and get back a token. And this token you could use for whatever purposes. You can also send it again to another person. And this is a way to raise money. And I think I mentioned in our previous episode that we did this with the company that I work at. We raised money through this way. That was one of the main applications at that time of smart contracts on Ethereum. But now you have a lot of other applications. And if I were you, I would focus on those things that you can actually use rather than all these technicalities of the network. So it's not necessary anymore.
I think that really explains why I love crypto also, is because when I discovered Bitcoin for the first time, what I found so interesting was the fact that I had to know about geopolitics, economy, I had to know some technical stuff. It really forces you to look into all those different areas of life. And right now I'm starting to get a grip of that. I'm starting to get a grip of what Bitcoin is and why Bitcoin will, in my mind, be such a great revolution and why it will succeed. Now with Ethereum, I'm struggling to see that function still. So I think it would be good to give me an example, like a real life, like big why of Ethereum. Why is this as necessary as Bitcoin, for example?
Okay. I think it's hard for me personally. It's hard to give you one example because the example, annoyingly so, is that you can basically run every kind of program on the blockchain itself. But I can give you some examples of programs that have value in the real world. One of them obviously being the fact that you can create your own token. So if you, for example, are a nonprofit organization and you do not want to have a central, like a small group of people that decides the direction of the company. You want to create a very democratic kind of organization. Then what you could do is completely on the Ethereum blockchain run something they call a DAO, a decentralized autonomous organization. And the Ethereum Foundation, there has been in the history of Ethereum a DAO hack. So Basically, they needed to fork the whole chain because this went wrong. Theoretically, what it is nothing more than the ability to decide through a smart contract what direction an organization, so a group of people, worldwide perhaps, would take. And you can program this in. And there's not any central person that manages this program. The program is launched and run on the blockchain, and you cannot change it ever.
But that's a amazing why factor.
Yeah, it's quite big.
So you can.
It's only one of the few.
Yes, but only this for me is already like wow. So I can make a democratic process on the blockchain for organizations, for businesses,
Yep.
for maybe countries. I don't know, whatever.
For countries too, yeah, anyone can do this, yeah, and it's impossible to alter because once the contract has been launched, you cannot change it. You can only create a new contract, but that's it. You can theoretically build a contract that can be like killed, but everyone will know that it can be killed, so they don't trust it, right? So this is the cool thing about the public blockchain. You can create a decentralized, completely autonomous organization where anyone can participate, anyone can vote. It's more or less as democratic as it gets.
That's so cool.
Yeah, that's one of the advantages.
And that is just one of the possibilities that Ethereum offers. All right, and why Ethereum then? Because I hear people in my direct surroundings saying, no, there's now Polkadot, or there's now this, or there's now this other project. This will beat Ethereum. Why are you still so hyped about Ethereum?
Yeah, that's a super good question because one of the reasons many like I don't know the specific reasons for all of these other projects, but many of the reasons are related to well, obviously when a project is older, it will be slower, right? I mean, if you have the new kid on the block, they can go faster than Ethereum can, and Ethereum is not perfect. It's not fast. It's working on this, but it's working on this very slowly because it's big. And when you have a new project, they can basically solve all those problems from the get-go, and that obviously makes it, a very good argument because they're better. Technically, they're better, but they don't have the size, they don't have the structure, they don't have the governance. Ethereum has the Ethereum Foundation. They have organized so many conferences. I've joined. There's in Berlin. There's always these. Well, this year it was quite different because of Corona, of course. But there are these blockchain weeks, and you have a lot of Ether related events there, or it's just Ethereum community events, and it's so big, this community, and I think it's really easy to miss when you're reading online. The only thing you're reading about is the tech. When you're in the community, and I'm not even that deep into it, but then you see how big it actually is. The amount of people thinking and working on stuff like this, I think it's more unstoppable than some people might assume it is. When you already have people that are working and invested in a project with their knowledge, their time, their energy, their money for so long.
But the leadership is centralized.
Yeah.
Right?
As opposed to Bitcoin, which of course, the software itself is run by an open source community. So it's, in that sense, it's very similar to Ethereum. Like there's not a central person that can say this is where Ethereum should go. He does not have that power, and I don't think he would even want it.
But there is a central point of attack.
More central than Bitcoin, I think.
More central. There is the CEO.
No, it's not run like this.
Okay, so if I want to attack Ethereum, I just cannot attack.
No,
Vitalik.
if you kidnap Vitalik, the project will still run. There's like a complete community of researchers and people working on it. That I mean, it would certainly be a hit for the community, of course. The guy is super central to the organization, but they won't be stopped.
But is this in your mind a problem or not?
I don't think so. I don't think this is a problem. No.
And why not?
Because the Ethereum itself and the people around it and the companies and all the communities that are working on it that's the cool thing about this. They all have this ideal of decentralization in mind, right? So when you attack a central target, if they would react on it like a central organization would, that would defy their fundamental identity. And I think people in groups do not want to act in a way that defies what they in their values are built upon. I think in that sense, you can rest assured that similar thing with Bitcoin. If I would attack some of the core Bitcoin core devs, which is one of the most run, like by far the most run Bitcoin software, of course that will be a huge hit for the project. What will happen is new devs will join, and they'll continue the project because it's completely open source. That's what I assume will happen.
All right.
Because the project's too big. If you have 1,000 Ether, and you're a developer, then you'll try to bring the project forward. And there are quite a couple of people like this, right?
What does this mean? I have 1,000 Ether.
It means basically you have 1,000 coins, more or less. So it's
Ethereum coins.
Ether is basically the coin itself. So it's Bitcoin in the Bitcoin world. You have one BTC or one Bitcoin.
Yeah.
And Ethereum is one Ether.
And I can just buy one Ether.
Yeah, you can, similarly to where you would buy Bitcoin, you can buy it at Box Crypto, for example, or Coinbase.
That's so convenient, Zowie.
So great. I know.
Great. I'm just gonna buy some Bitcoin. Oh no, some Ether at Box.
You should, yeah.
Okay, great.
Yeah.
And what is one Ether worth at this point?
Last time I checked, it's 1,060 euros.
1,060 euros. Okay.
Yeah, 1,060. Yeah.
All right.
Yeah, it's risen tremendously. It's like Bitcoin did in the last month.
Yeah, because I'm seeing all these messages and all these news articles in my YouTube feed. Ethereum will be worth 27,000 euros in the next year, and all this kind of stuff.
Clickbait. Yeah.
Yeah. Well, what is your view on that? Is it, as I hear you right now, like Ethereum is a project that is here to stay?
I think so.
Yeah. So you are quite confident, I believe, in the whole concept of Ethereum, and you believe, as with Bitcoin, that this will probably be a big one.
Yeah.
So as a friend, I am not currently holding any Ether. Should I invest some in Ether, or can I just, as a Bitcoin maximalist, should I just put that in Bitcoin?
I mean, the usual disclaimer is I'm not
Yeah,
going
true.
to
No, that's
I'm not going to give investment advice.
exactly.
But if you are already big into crypto and you hold Bitcoin, a lot of it, and you believe in the general mission of crypto and not only Bitcoin, you're like, yeah, decentralization, and that's the way forward, then I would not necessarily see any reason not to invest in Ethereum, because they represent the mission and the ideals very well, in my opinion. They take a very pragmatic approach. Whereas if you talk about Bitcoin, I think it's definitely more kind of production ready, right? Because they're more conservative. They want to keep everything stable. Ethereum is not like this, but they are working on the next gen, in my opinion, and that's why I think it's very interesting. Yeah, I believe that Ethereum will be able to. Well, what's also interesting is Ethereum will be a massive addition to what is possible with Bitcoin. And they're also they're talking about it, being a store of value as well.
Ethereum.
And that would be in the future, because Ethereum 2.0, which is the second version that they're working on right now, and it's not done yet. So they divided it in phases. But when this is done, the thesis is that it will also be a store of value.
So in that regard, Ethereum will become a competitor of Bitcoin.
I wouldn't say it necessarily becomes a competitor. Because
are they competitors right now?
No, I don't think so. No, I think they operate in the same field, of course. I mean, that's obvious. But next to the fact that the functionality is very different, they will also have different consensus algorithms. So we spoke about proof of work in the Bitcoin episode, and Ethereum now runs on proof of work, but is migrating actively and kind of is already running on proof of stake. And this is a different consensus algorithm, where in proof of work, you have miners that do work. And this, one of the main arguments against Bitcoin is, of course, the energy consumption. And there's a lot of reasonable arguments to give that it costs a lot of money to invest in the technology needed to mine Bitcoin. And you'll have pools that will, collect the money and also the hardware to mine collectively. And then they will share the profits. This causes centralization indirectly. And of course, you have this risk in general in everything in the world, I think, when power will eventually centralize, and then you need to kind of consistently diffuse that. But proof of stake does not have a similar risk of power consumption and, of centralization like you have in the mining world, in proof of work, because in proof of stake, the fact that you can verify a transaction is more dependent on the stake that you have in the network. So instead of buying hardware, you would just buy the currency. And there are a few ways, of course, in which the most obvious security risks are mitigated, because the obvious question then is, well, okay, cool, I can buy 51% of all the ether. But the thing is, and this is kind of the thesis, so they need to do a lot of testing, and there has been a lot of testing on proof of stake. If you invest so much money in holding 51% of the network, will it still be incentivized for you? Would you still have a reason to screw up the network by owning it, because that will decrease the value because people will start selling. So you're literally kind of cutting your own fingers, right? Because people distrust a currency that is manipulated.
Yeah, true. So proof of stake is just I buy a certain amount of ether, which I then have a certain stake, and that gives me power.
Yeah, that gives you you can run a validator, as it's called. So that's basically as if you would run a Bitcoin node, but then on Ethereum. And then rather than doing proof of work, you would validate transactions. And validating a transaction is a lot simpler than doing the proof of work. And this is the cool thing about Ethereum. It's also more in line with the world computer vision. You don't need a strong computer to do such a thing. So many more devices can actually run Ethereum. And this would increase decentralization because you have more devices that can, with a lot less investment, can run a node.
All right. So the more ether I hold, the bigger my stake is.
Yeah. So your stake is measured in Ethereum.
And what does this mean for me individually? If I have a big stake in Ethereum?
If you have a big stake in Ethereum, basically it means you can validate more transactions. So you will kind of, the amount of transactions you can validate is correlated, kind of in line with the amount of Ethereum you stake. It also means your relative risk is higher, because if you go down, if Ethereum goes down, or you go down as a validator, like your node just shuts down, you'll get slashed.
Slashed?
Yeah, slash meaning that you get a punishment, more or less, for the fact that you are not an active participant in the network, even though you have a responsibility, because the network is relying on you to validate transactions.
And as a reward, I earn ether for that.
Yes.
All right. So that's the same concept with mining.
Yes.
All right.
Exactly.
Okay. So the bigger my stake is, the more I can mine.
Yeah, and this is also the built-in inflation part.
There's a built-in inflation part.
Similarly to Bitcoin, there's more Bitcoin being created, and there's also more Ethereum being created as you mine, which is the reward that you get.
All right. So that's basically the same concept.
It's extremely yeah.
All right. Starts to make sense.
Cool.
I am tying some things together. Yeah, I have a few questions. You just named Ethereum 2.0. I'm not sure if that is. Should we dive into that a little bit?
We can do the basics. First off, I've done reading and listening to some podcasts and talking to a few people about Ethereum 2.0, and I think it would, in my head at least, it's already so much to mention that it would require a second episode of a half an hour to an hour to mention everything that's being done there, because it's pretty big.
Yeah, I think that what we just discussed is already a lot to digest, and the whole thing with this crypto world is that it seems to go so incredibly fast.
Yeah.
And even for us, like you work on this at a daily basis, but for me, that for someone that is just reading about it and maybe 20 minutes a day, I'm catching up with some stuff. It's going so fast, and I have to really push in order to keep up with all the new information and cool projects. But let's keep it with this for now, as a small introduction.
Cool.
I have many questions for next time.
All right.
I also want to read a bit more into this. I think I should diversify my portfolio as well right now.
Yeah, it could be a good idea.
Yeah, and I think that's it for me. Do you have anything to add? Any points we need to touch upon?
It might be interesting. So I know that we've gone through the basics of Ethereum, and we touched a little bit upon the story and the fact that there's people behind it in the community, and I think those are all very relevant factors, and also the price. what I find interesting is maybe to also mention a few things that are actually built on top of Ethereum, because there's a whole different sector that we haven't even touched, and that's DeFi,
Oh,
decentralized finance. And that's a buzzword nowadays. And I think most people that are kind of into crypto know about it, and people that are deeper into it really know how all of that stuff works. And I would just love to give you a short, like a 5 minute kind of
elevator.
overview, elevator pitch on what
Yeah.
DeFi is. Yeah.
All right. Well, I'm ready. DeFi. Let's go. Zoe.
Go. Ding, ding, ding. So DeFi stands for decentralized finance. And you can imagine that once you build tokens on top of Ethereum, you start to think about what more can I do with these tokens? And this is where decentralized finance comes in. Anything that we are used to from the financial industry, like derivatives, like lending, the borrowing and lending, those all become possible on top of Ethereum. Now, you can imagine what's the real advantage here. Like you could similarly, as you would go to a bank and you would borrow money and you would pay interests, you can do something very, very similar on Ethereum. You can go to a smart contract and you can borrow money from the smart contract. And there's a couple of course, quirks here. One of the advantages of Ethereum here is that you can actually also lend very easily to the same smart contract. Now, Ethereum itself is nothing more. It would kind of defy the mission of Ethereum to say it's nothing more, but it's just programs running on a blockchain. But one program can call another program.
Mm-hmm.
So you can imagine that one token can call or execute another token or another contract. So you can create, and this is where it becomes fascinating. They call this money Lego, as in Lego. You would the old kind of thing you would play with as a kid. You can literally stack financial smart contracts on top of each other, where you can say, okay, I'm going to borrow some money from this smart contract. The borrowed money I'm going to send to this smart contract automatically and exchange it for this. Then what I exchange it for, I will use to pay back the money that I borrowed, and part of the money that is left after I paid it back, I will hold. So I make some money on top of it. And you can create all of these like transaction flows. And you can do this just by programming. And there are projects built on top of Ethereum that just allow you to click and do stuff like this with your money. And you don't even know what happens in the back, but in the back they call like all of these financial instruments. And you can do really fascinating things. And you can algorithmically define what flows, like what currencies you borrow in what order, and then make money off of this. And this is something that's being actively done. And this is basically money Legos, as in you would just Lego your transactions on top of one another.
All right.
Does that make sense?
It does make sense.
Cool.
I'm also a little bit reading into DeFi myself. I think this is quite next level. And this will crystallize in the coming decade, perhaps. But this is really the next big thing.
Yeah, it's nerds in finance, basically.
Yeah, it's really nerds in finance, definitely. Okay, cool. I think we should definitely go into this in a different episode.
Yeah, I think it would be cool to do a DeFi Ethereum 2.0 combined episode, because they're also very related.
Some cool DeFi projects like Compound. Maybe you dive into that?
I would love to. Yeah, Compound, MakerDAO is
Yeah.
also pretty cool. Aave is a new one. There's a lot of cool stuff. Yeah.
Well, there's a whole
Yeah.
whole world for us to explore.
I have like twinkly eyes.
Yeah, nice. Okay, well, prepare, guys. We have 50 more podcasts coming up.
Oh yeah.
Okay, cool. I think I want to keep it with this. This is a lot of information. I'm going to sleep on this for a few nights, and then I'll come back to you.
Cool. Awesome.
Thanks.
Thank you, man. Good questions.
Ciao.